The United States just lost access to some of the most critical materials it depends on to power industries, secure its military, and drive innovation. China, in a sweeping geopolitical move, has banned exports of key resources to the United States. What happens next could change the course of the global economy and your life. Stay with us as we unpack this unfolding crisis. China's decision to cut off exports wasn't made in a vacuum. It's a calculated response to years of escalating tensions. Following U.S. sanctions targeting Chinese tech firms like Huawei and export controls on semiconductors, Beijing decided it was time to push back. This export ban targets key materials, including gallium and germanium, which are indispensable for everything from microchips to renewable energy. A statement from China's Ministry of Commerce in 2024, quoted in the Financial Times, justified the move as essential to safeguarding national security. Beyond rhetoric, the timing aligns with heightened geopolitical tensions over Taiwan, making it clear this is as much about asserting dominance as protecting resources. China's strategic restraint sends a message. Economic interdependence can be a weapon. As former U.S. Trade Representative Charlene Barshevsky noted in a recent interview, this is a power play, plain and simple. By disrupting critical supply chains, China is leveraging its position as a manufacturing giant to shift the balance of power. Please like and subscribe. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us grow. Thank you. Rare earth elements like neodymium, dysprosium, and yttrium are the unsung heroes of modern technology. They're essential for producing items as diverse as electric vehicle motors, missile guidance systems, and wind turbines. The challenge lies in the refinement process, which is complex, expensive, and environmentally taxing. That's why most countries, including the United States, rely on China, which refines 85% of the world's rare earths, according to the U.S. Geological Survey in 2024. For the United States, this dependence is a vulnerability. For example, 90% of rare earth magnets used in the defense industry are sourced from Chinese suppliers. This includes components for fighter jets, drones, and even nuclear submarines. Without access to these materials, manufacturing slows, costs skyrocket, and the country's technological edge erodes. In the words of Dr. Deborah Wintz-Smith, CEO of the Council on Competitiveness, we're not just talking about supply chain disruption. We're talking about strategic paralysis if we don't address this over-reliance. China's export ban demonstrates how deeply intertwined economic policy is with geopolitical strategy. By targeting industries that are foundational to U.S. national security and technological innovation, Beijing has turned supply chains into battlegrounds. Consider this: the 2024 Pentagon report on critical materials revealed that 75% of rare earth components used in U.S. defense applications originate from China. A sudden halt in supply leaves the U.S. military scrambling to source alternatives, exposing critical vulnerabilities in its operational readiness. Economist Brad Setzer recently explained, this highlights a geopolitical chess move. By pulling back exports, China forces the U.S. to reckon with the fragility of its own supply chains. The export ban has laid bare the U.S.'s over-reliance on globalized supply chains, particularly for critical materials. American industries optimize for cost efficiency rather than resilience, leaving them unprepared for a disruption of this magnitude. Key sectors feeling the pinch include defense. Lockheed Martin and Raytheon face delays in missile production due to rare earth shortages. Renewable energy. Projects like offshore wind farms are stalled as prices for key materials surge. Consumer electronics. Apple and other tech giants are scrambling to diversify their supply chains to avoid production halts. A 2024 Wall Street Journal analysis estimates that rebuilding domestic rare earth production could take 7 to 10 years and cost upwards of $100 billion. These vulnerabilities highlight how interdependence can quickly become a liability in a volatile geopolitical environment. The seeds of this crisis were planted during the 2018 US-China trade war, which saw tariffs and sanctions escalate into a full-blown tech rivalry. The US restricted Chinese firms' access to advanced technologies like semiconductors, while Beijing doubled down on efforts to achieve self-sufficiency. By 2020, China had already identified rare earths as a potential countermeasure, quietly stockpiling materials and developing alternative markets. Fast forward to 2024, and Beijing is wielding this leverage to maximum effect, forcing the US to confront the long-term consequences of its trade policies. As trade expert Jeffrey Sachs remarked, the trade war was a short-term strategy with long-term repercussions. Both nations miscalculated how deeply entwined their economies had become. The immediate fallout is severe. Industries reliant on critical materials face skyrocketing costs and production delays. Tech sector. Companies like Intel and Qualcomm report increased lead times for semiconductor manufacturing, driving up costs. Automotive electric vehicle manufacturers, including Tesla, face shortages of rare earth magnets, jeopardizing production targets. Defense. The Pentagon is racing to secure alternative sources for components used in radar systems and missile technologies. A 2024 report by Deloitte projects that the ban could cost U.S. industries $80 billion annually, with ripple effects throughout the broader economy. In the short term, these disruptions threaten to slow innovation and reduce global competitiveness. The export ban isn't just an industrial problem. It's about to hit consumers where it hurts. Expect to see higher prices. Smartphones, laptops, and electric vehicles could become significantly more expensive due to increased production costs. Delays. Longer wait times for popular tech products as manufacturers scramble to find alternative suppliers. Limited availability. Products like smart home devices may face supply shortages, frustrating consumers. A 2024 CNBC consumer survey found that 72% of Americans are already concerned about rising costs tied to global supply chain issues. This ban amplifies those fears, putting additional pressure on household budgets. China's pivot to self-reliance isn't just a response to U.S. policies. It's a transformative strategy. Over the past decade, Beijing has invested heavily in domestic innovation through initiatives like Made in China 2025, building world-class capabilities in sectors like AI, semiconductors, and green energy. Today, companies like Huawei and BYD are challenging Western dominance in telecommunications and electric vehicles. By reducing its dependence on foreign technology, China is not only insulating itself from sanctions, but also positioning itself as a global leader in emerging industries. Tech analyst Kai-Fu Lee recently observed, China isn't just catching up. It's leapfrogging ahead in key areas. The next decade will determine whether the US can keep pace. China isn't acting alone. The BRICS nations are increasingly aligned in their efforts to challenge Western economic hegemony. Together, these countries represent 40% of the global population and have launched initiatives to reduce reliance on the US dollar. In 2024, BRICS unveiled a new trade settlement mechanism that allows member nations to transact in local currencies. This aligns with China's broader push to promote the yuan as an alternative to the dollar in global trade. As BRICS gains momentum, the US faces the prospect of a fragmented global economy, where its influence is diminished in key regions. China's efforts to internationalize the yuan are aimed at reducing its vulnerability to US-led financial sanctions. By encouraging trade partners to settle transactions in yuan, Beijing is gradually eroding the dollar's dominance in global markets. According to 2024 data from the International Monetary Fund, the yuan now accounts for 12% of global foreign exchange reserves, up from 3% in 2015. This shift signals a growing willingness among nations to diversify away from the dollar. Financial analyst Eswar Prasad explains the dollar's dominance isn't guaranteed. As China builds alternative systems, the US must adapt or risk losing its financial supremacy. US allies are treading carefully. While nations like Japan and the EU share concerns about China's aggressive tactics, they're also reluctant to provoke Beijing. The European Union recently announced a $50 billion rare earth supply chain fund to reduce dependence on both the US and China. Meanwhile, countries like India are positioning themselves as alternative manufacturing hubs, though their capacity is years away from rivaling China's scale. This balancing act underscores the complexities of navigating a world where economic and geopolitical interests are increasingly intertwined. The signs are unmistakable. Much like the US-Soviet Cold War, this standoff is defined by a struggle for technological and economic dominance. However, this conflict is being fought through trade restrictions, supply chain disruptions, and financial systems, rather than military alliances. As historian Niall Ferguson noted, we're witnessing a new kind of Cold War, one where the battlefield is economic interdependence and the stakes are global leadership. The consequences extend far beyond the US and China. European industries reliant on rare earth imports are bracing for disruptions, while developing nations face rising costs for critical technologies. The World Bank estimates that a prolonged trade war could reduce global GDP growth by 0.4% annually. Emerging economies like Vietnam and Indonesia may benefit as companies diversify supply chains, but these gains will take years to materialize. 3 key scenarios are on the horizon. Decoupling. Both nations create parallel supply chains, leading to a fragmented global economy. Collaboration. Diplomatic efforts lead to a truce, fostering limited cooperation. Escalation. Economic warfare intensifies, with both sides doubling down on sanctions and restrictions. The choices made in the next decade will shape the future of global trade and technological innovation. China's export ban has exposed deep vulnerabilities in the US economy. The question now is whether the US can adapt quickly enough to offset these challenges, or if this marks the beginning of a long-term decline. What do you think is the most significant consequence of this ban? Let us know. We're glad you're enjoying this video. Please like and subscribe. Check out another video that is now on your screen.